3 days ago, I thought I was flagging errors in a stranger's prenup until I saw my husband's name listed as the proposing party. Then I found a cheap burner phone in his trunk and urgent bank papers for a $280,000 loan bearing my forged signature. He came home wearing the smile of a man who had won everything. But when he looked at what I had waiting on the kitchen island, that smile died instantly. My name is Brianna Cole. I am 33 years old, and for the last decade, I have made my living finding the cracks in other people's promises as a contract lawyer for Cedar and Wren Legal. I sit at this granite island in our oversized house in the suburbs of Austin, Texas, and I tell corporations where they are vulnerable. But 3 days ago, I missed the vulnerability in my own life. The garage door rumbled beneath the floorboards, a low vibration that used to mean safety. Not today. Today. It signaled the arrival of the defendant. Graham walked through the mudroom door a moment later. My husband, the 36-year-old project director at Halston Vale Group, looked like he was walking on air. He dragged his leather Toomey suitcase behind him, his suit jacket thrown casually over his shoulder, wearing the smile of a man who had just bluffed his way into a fortune. Bree. "You are not going to believe the turbulence out of Denver," Graham shouted, dropping his keys in the bowl. He came around the island, smelling of stale airplane air and triumph. But it was worth it. The partners loved the pitch. We are talking about a bonus that covers the last 2 years combined. I was thinking we finally book that Italy trip. Just you, me, and the Amalfi Coast. I did not turn to face him. I did not smile. I did not offer to take his bag. Instead, I reached under the counter and produced 2 items. I placed them on the cool stone surface between us with a deliberate, heavy silence. The first was a cheap, black prepaid phone with a spiderweb crack running across the screen. I had found it taped under the passenger seat of his car when I moved it to sweep the garage. The second was a thick stack of paperwork from Summit Harbor Bank, clipped open to the signature page. Graham's smile did not fade naturally. It was severed. He froze mid-step, his hand halfway extended to touch my shoulder. His eyes darted from my face to the cracked phone, and I saw his pupils dilate. It was the look of a man seeing a landmine after he had already heard the click. "Bree," he stammered, his voice jumping an octave. What is this Denver?" I said flatly. "You were in Denver?" "Yeah, I told you. I just got back." He laughed, but it was a hollow, breathless sound. "Why are you looking at me like that? And whose phone is that?" He was trying to pivot. He wanted to talk about Italy. He wanted to talk about bonuses. He wanted to talk about anything except the document under my hand. I looked down at the paper. It had arrived via courier at 10 this morning, stamped urgent. It was a finalized agreement for a home equity line of credit on our house. The amount approved was $280,000. At the bottom of the page was a signature Brianna Cole. To a layman, it was perfect. But I do not look at documents like a layman. I look at them like a forensic analyst. I saw the hesitation mark at the top of the capital B. I saw the way the ink pooled slightly at the end of the last name, indicating the writer had paused to check a reference image. The pressure was all wrong. It was a drawing of my name, not a signature. I had spent the last 6 hours in what I call lawyer mode. I did not scream. I did not throw things. I went to my office and scanned every single page, including the shipping label and the envelope. I uploaded the files to a hidden cloud directory I named Holiday Menu Drafts, a folder I knew Graham would never touch in 1,000 years. Then I had called the bank. The loan processor had been chipper, congratulating me on the approval. When I asked how the notary verified my identity without me being present, she laughed. She told me the remote video session had gone perfectly. She said I looked lovely on camera. Someone had sat in a room, wearing a wig or using a filter, and pretended to be me while my husband mortgaged our life away. Graham's hand twitched. He reached out, his fingers hovering over the burner phone. his instinct to destroy evidence overriding his common sense. "Don't," I said. My voice was quiet, but it hit him like a physical blow. "I have already backed it all up. The texts, the location history, the photos." Graham stopped. His hand retracted as if the phone were white hot. For the first time in our 7-year marriage, the charming, confident mask slipped completely, and I saw the terrified stranger living underneath. "Bree." "Wait," he whispered, and the sweat was already breaking on his forehead. It's not what it looks like. It looks like fraud." "Graham," I said, looking him dead in the eye, "and I am the lawyer who is going to review the case." As soon as the water pipes groaned, signaling Graham had turned on the shower, I moved. I did not run, but I walked with the swift, silent urgency of a paralegal 5 minutes before a filing deadline. I grabbed a pair of latex gloves from the cleaning kit under the sink, a habit from handling old evidence boxes, and slipped out to the garage. The interior of his Audi was warm and smelled faintly of leather and something else. I leaned in, inhaling deeply. It was a sharp, cloying scent of white gardenias and musk. I wear sandalwood. This was not me. This was a scent left by a passenger who wanted to be noticed. I reached under the passenger seat. My fingers brushed against the carpet until they hit cool plastic. I pulled out the burner phone I had spotted earlier. It was a cheap Android model, the kind you buy with cash at a gas station. I pressed the power button. The battery icon was red, hovering at 4%. I needed the passcode. I looked at the screen and felt a cold, bitter laugh rise in my chest. Graham was not a mastermind. He was a narcissist. A narcissist always anchors their secrets to their own milestones. I typed in the 4 digits of our wedding anniversary. The screen unlocked instantly. It was the sharpest insult of the night. He used the date he vowed to cherish me to lock away the evidence of his betrayal. There was only one message thread. The contact name was initials H.S. I opened it. The most recent image was sent 3 days ago. It showed 2 crystal flutes of champagne resting on a balcony railing. In the background, out of focus but unmistakable to a local, was the dome of the Texas state capitol. The geotag at the bottom confirmed it. The Driscoll Hotel, Austin, Texas. He had not been in Denver. He had been 20 minutes away, toasting to his victory while I was home paying the bills. I scrolled down to the text messages. My hands were steady, but my stomach churned acid. Graham Notary bought it. You were perfect. H.S. After the prenup update, she's boxed in. When do we file? I pulled out my own iPhone and switched to video mode. I could not risk screenshots or forwarding these to myself. That would leave a digital footprint he might notice. I recorded the screen of the burner phone, scrolling slowly. I narrated the timestamp and the sender information in a whisper for the record. Then I tapped on the calendar app. There was one entry for last Tuesday at 10:15 in the morning, notary. The screen of the burner phone went black. The battery had died. I slipped the dead phone back under the seat, exactly at the angle I found it. I stripped off the gloves and walked back into the kitchen, my mind racing through my own calendar. Last Tuesday, 10:15 in the morning. I pulled up my work schedule on my laptop. At 10:15 last Tuesday, I was in a mandatory compliance training session on Zoom. The session was recorded. There were 40 other lawyers on the call. I had typed questions in the chat log. I had an airtight, digital, time-stamped alibi. It was physically impossible for me to be signing loan documents in front of a notary at that moment. I needed more. I went to the filing cabinet in the home office. Graham was sloppy with physical keys. He kept them in a magnetic box stuck to the back of the bottom drawer. I felt around and found it. Inside was a small brass key with a yellow plastic tag. Written on the tag in black marker was Unit 229. I did not take it. Taking it would alert him. I photographed the key, the tag, and the specific way the magnetic box was oriented against the metal drawer. Then I put it back. I sat down at the kitchen island with a legal pad. I began to draw a timeline, the same way I did for contract disputes. Item 1, a new credit card opened in my name 3 weeks ago. Item 2, the fake trip to Denver. Item 3, the notary appointment at 10:15. Item 4, the HELOC paperwork arriving today. Item 5, the text regarding a prenup update. Boxed in. The text had said, they were not just stealing money. They were restructuring the legal framework of our marriage to ensure that when the blow came, I would be left with the debt and he would be left with the assets. I heard the water turn off upstairs. I closed the laptop and flipped the legal pad over. My instinct was to confront him, to scream, to throw the phone at his head, but anger is a liability in litigation. Anger makes you messy. I took a deep breath. I would not ask him about the phone again tonight. I would apologize for being stressed. I would ask about his flight. I would play the part of the tired, oblivious wife for exactly 48 hours, because if I stayed silent, he would get comfortable. And when men like Graham get comfortable, they make mistakes. Bree. Graham called from the top of the stairs, his voice tentative. Are you okay down there? I'm fine, I called back, my voice steady and light. Just looking at dinner options. I think I was just hungry. I looked at the blank back of the legal pad. The investigation had officially begun. The conference room at Wynn and Calder was quieter than a library, insulated by thick glass and the weight of billable hours. Darla Wynn, a woman who had dismantled more fortunes than the IRS, slid the photocopy of the HELOC agreement back across the mahogany table. She did not look horrified. She looked unimpressed. It is not amateur, Darla said, tapping a manicured nail on the signature line. The slant is consistent. The loop on the B matches your natural handwriting. Whoever did this studied your hand for weeks. But it is too confident. Real signatures have microtremors. This flows like artwork. He is not just stealing from you, Brianna. He is erasing you. I want to freeze the accounts today, I said, my voice tight. I want to lock him out of everything. No, Darla countered, her tone sharp. If you lock him out now, you trigger his panic response. He will liquidate whatever cash is not in the house, dump the crypto we do not know about yet, and destroy the paper trail for that shell company. We do not want a divorce yet. We want a containment field. I nodded slowly. The contract lawyer in me understood. You do not breach until you have the remedy secured. I left her office with a checklist that replaced my heartbeat. Step 1 was financial insulation. I drove to a credit union across town, one where Graham and I had zero history. I opened a checking account solely in my name and updated my direct deposit portal at work. For the next pay cycle, my salary would vanish from our joint view. I set up transaction alerts for every single movement in our joint accounts. Anything over $1 would ping a secure app on my phone. Step 2 was digital fortification. I bought a prepaid SIM card and inserted it into an old iPhone I kept for testing. I changed the passwords to my personal email, my cloud storage, and my primary banking login. I routed all two-factor authentication codes to the new prepaid number. If Graham tried to reset my passwords, his phone would remain silent. I froze my credit with all 3 major bureaus, locking the door before he could drag any more debt through it. Step 3 was the hardest surveillance. I stopped at an electronics store and bought 3 compact Wi-Fi cameras. When Graham came home that evening, I was standing on a step stool in the kitchen, mounting a camera above the refrigerator. "What is all this?" he asked, eyeing the device with immediate suspicion. "Did you not see the next door alert?" I lied effortlessly. Stepping down. 2 houses on Elm Street got hit yesterday, porch pirates and a backdoor break-in. I am not taking chances with the laptop sitting out. Graham hesitated. He looked at the camera, then at me. If he objected, he would look guilty. If he agreed, he was consenting to be recorded. Good idea. he said, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. Better safe than sorry. I installed the second one in the living room and the third in the garage, pointing directly at his Audi. Once he was asleep, I began the inventory. I moved through the house like an insurance adjuster. I pulled bottles of wine from the rack, photographing the labels and the vintage years. I located his watch collection, opening the box to capture the serial numbers on the back of his Rolex and his Omega. I found the title to his car and scanned it. Every photo was time-stamped and uploaded immediately to the encrypted holiday menu folder. I sent the raw logs from the burner phone and the high-resolution scan of the loan documents to Darla. She was already drafting the petition for a temporary restraining order on assets, ready to be filed the second we had enough to pull the trigger. The next morning, I sent Graham a text while I was at work, thinking of making pasta tonight. Do we need wine? It was the most mundane text imaginable. It was the text of a wife who knew nothing, who was worried about dinner rather than felonies. Sounds great, babe, he replied. I'll pick up a bottle. I stared at the screen. I made a new rule for myself right then. I would not scream. I would not cry. I would not ask him why. Every interaction from this moment forward was either evidence collection or a trap. I was not his partner anymore. I was the opposing counsel, and he just did not know court was in session. I had underestimated how quickly the narrative would shift. I thought I was the one building a case, but Graham was already building a cage. It started with a phone call from Kara Mills, my best friend since law school. Kara is usually the person I call to bury a body, metaphorically speaking, but when I picked up, her voice was not filled with the usual warmth. It was hesitant, laced with a pity that made my skin crawl. Bree. Hey, she said, pausing too long. I just got off the phone with Graham. He sounded really worried about you. I froze, my hand hovering over the mouse at my kitchen workspace. Worried about what he said, you have been acting erratic, Kara said, the words tumbling out faster now. He said you are paranoid, that you are installing surveillance cameras inside the house and tracking his location. He said you snapped at him about some trip to Denver Bree. He thinks you might be having a breakdown. The air left my lungs. It was not just a lie. It was a strategic strike. Graham was not just stealing my money. He was stealing my credibility. If I went to court screaming about fraud and he had already planted the seed that I was mentally unstable, the judge would look at me not as a victim, but as a hysterical woman. Kara, I said, forcing my voice to remain terrifyingly calm. Did he mention the $280,000 loan he took out in my name without my consent? What no? He just said, exactly. I cut her off. I am not having a breakdown. I am conducting an audit. I hung up before she could ask another question. I realized then that I was not just fighting a thief, I was fighting a character assassination. Later that evening, the motion sensor on my phone pinged. I opened the app and watched the live feed from the kitchen camera. Graham walked in. He stopped dead when he saw the small black lens mounted above the fridge. His jaw tightened, a flash of pure rage crossing his face. But then, as if remembering he was on stage, he forced a smile. It was a grotesque, tight expression. He gave a little wave to the camera, playing the part of the patient, long-suffering husband dealing with a crazy wife. He could not tear it down. If he tore it down, he looked violent. If he left it up, I saw everything. Then the digital assault began. My phone started buzzing incessantly on the counter. Ping, ping, ping. Alert failed login attempt on joint checking. Alert password reset requested for Apple ID. Alert suspicious access blocked on Schwab investment account. He was in the other room, frantically trying to regain control of the ship I had already commandeered. He was testing every door, every window of our digital life, and finding them bolted shut. I did not storm into the living room to confront him. I did not scream. I simply picked up my phone and saw a text from his sister, asking if I was okay and suggesting I get some rest. I copied and pasted the same response I had prepared for everyone. Everything is being handled through legal counsel. I sent it to his sister. I sent it to Kara. Then I turned off notifications. I refused to drown in the noise he was creating. And then, the mistake happened. The kind of mistake that only happens when arrogant people get sloppy. A new email landed in my inbox. It was from an unfamiliar address. Something generic like legal, consult, secure. But the subject line made my blood run cold. FW Draft Strategy Competency Narrative. It had been forwarded to me. A slip of the finger. Autocomplete filling in Bree instead of Brian or Brett or whoever was helping him. I opened it. The text was clinically brutal. Goal establish pattern of instability. If we can trigger a public outburst within the next 72 hours, we can file for temporary emergency guardianship. This will allow us to override her freeze on the assets. Note, leverage the credit card debt currently in her name as evidence of manic spending. I stared at the screen. The room seemed to tilt. They were planning to gaslight me into a public scream so they could legally shackle me. They wanted to use the debt they forged to prove I was the irresponsible one. I printed the email. I saved it as a PDF. I forwarded it to Darla with a timestamp. I sat back in my chair. The fear that had been gnawing at my stomach evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I was no longer a confused wife being hunted. I was a prosecutor who had just been handed the murder weapon. You want a narrative, I whispered to the empty room. I'll give you a tragedy. The drive to the storage facility was a blur of neon signs and highway medians. I arrived at the gated complex just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long, menacing shadows across the rows of metal doors. I located Unit 229 down a narrow corridor that smelled of dust and damp concrete. I stood before the keypad, my heart hammering against my ribs. I did not have the code, but I had 7 years of marriage to a man who used the same 4 digits for everything from his debit card to his luggage lock. I punched in 1, 0, 2, 8, his birthday. The light on the keypad blinked green. A mechanical click echoed in the silence. I lifted the rolling metal door. I expected to see old furniture, maybe the boxes of college textbooks he claimed he could not part with. What I saw instead was a fully operational command center. The unit was lined with industrial shelving. On the shelves sat boxes of high-end electronics, cases of vintage whiskey, and designer handbags still in their dust covers. It looked like the stockroom of a fence. I stepped inside, the motion sensor light flooding the space with a harsh, clinical glare. On the back wall hung a large corkboard titled Exit Plan. It was a timeline, broken down by week, detailed with the precision of a project manager. I stepped closer. My eyes locked onto a task for the current week. Prenup update lock-in liability. Next to it was a bold red check mark. I turned to a folding table set up in the corner. On it lay a spiral-bound notebook. I opened it and felt the blood drain from my face. It was page after page of my name. Brianna Cole. Brianna Cole. Brianna Cole. It was not just doodling, it was practice. Next to the signatures were technical notes written in Graham's handwriting, loop B wider, and maintain pressure on the downstroke. He had sat here in this cold metal box, teaching his hand to become mine so he could sign away my future. I pulled out my phone and began photographing everything. I snapped the shelves, the corkboard, the notebook. Then I saw a stack of invoices. The top one was from a company called HS, Advisory for Consulting Services, totaling $5,000. The bill was addressed to a company I had never heard of, Pierce Meridian, LLC. I flipped the page to the incorporation documents clipped underneath. My finger traced down to the line for the registered agent. It read, Brianna Cole. He had not just stolen from me. He had created a shell company in my name. Any debt, any illegal activity, any tax evasion committed by Pierce Meridian, LLC would lead the authorities straight to my door. While he walked away clean, I forced my hands to stop shaking. I needed to document this, but I could not touch anything. If I took a single paper, he could claim I planted it. I had to leave the crime scene exactly as I found it. I lifted the edge of a manila envelope. Inside was a receipt from the Driscoll Hotel in downtown Austin. The date matched his Denver trip perfectly, and clipped to it was a handwritten note on hotel stationery. Proposal dinner Friday. Keep her calm. I stared at the words until they blurred. Proposal dinner. He was planning to propose to his coworker this Friday, and the instruction, keep her calm, was about me. He needed me docile, unaware, and legally bound to his debts before he put a ring on another woman's finger. I carefully placed the note back, aligning it with the edge of the table exactly as it had been. I backed out of the unit, checking the floor to ensure I left no footprints in the dust. I pulled the door down and heard the lock engage with a finality that sounded like a prison cell closing. I walked back to my car under the yellow buzz of the streetlights. The panic was gone. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. I understood now. This was not a marriage falling apart. This was a criminal enterprise with a launch date, Friday. I whispered to the empty parking lot. You want to propose on Friday. I unlocked my car door. He thought he was managing a risk. He had no idea he had just handed the auditor the entire paper trail. The notification on my dual monitor setup at Cedar & Wren Legal blinked green, signaling a new file assignment. It was flagged as a rush review for a corporate client. The conflict check system had cleared it automatically, likely because I practice under my maiden name, Cole, and Graham operates everything under his own last name, Pierce. I opened the digital file. The client name at the top of the header made the blood freeze in my veins. Graham Pierce. Attached to the file was a note from the intake partner. Client is a senior executive proposing to a coworker this weekend. He needs airtight asset protection before he puts a ring on it. Review the draft and flag liabilities. I stared at the screen. The universe was not just handing me a sign, it was handing me the playbook. I scrolled to the section labeled Asset and Liability Division. It was a masterclass in financial violence. Graham had listed Pierce Meridian LLC and the $280,000 home equity line of credit as liabilities belonging to the previous marital estate. He was using this document to formally sever himself from the debt he had secretly created in my name. He was preparing to walk into a new marriage with a clean slate, leaving me to drown in the wreckage of a shell company I never agreed to own. Then I found Clause 14, Paragraph 3. It read, in the event that the current spouse is deemed mentally incompetent or subject to an emergency conservatorship, all decision-making powers regarding the liquidation of joint assets shall revert immediately to the husband. My hand hovered over the mouse. This was the motive. The gaslighting, the calls to my friends, the competency narrative email I had intercepted. It was all designed to trigger this specific clause. He was not just leaving me. He was planning to have me declared insane so he could legally strip the house of its equity before the divorce papers were even served. I did not close the file. I did not recuse myself. I switched to my red digital pen. I am not your wife right now, I whispered to the screen. I am the auditor. I began to type comments in the margins. I did not write emotional objections. I wrote legal demands. Next to the mention of Pierce Meridian LLC, I typed documentation required. Please provide articles of incorporation and proof of capital contribution to verify this is a legitimate business entity and not a piercing the veil liability. Next to the competency clause, I highlighted the entire paragraph in angry red and typed unconscionable. This provision lacks reciprocal protection and requires a court-appointed independent evaluation, not a private claim. Remove or revise. I hit send on a formal request for disclosure. I asked for everything I had seen in Unit 229, the bank statements, the consulting invoices from HRS, advisory, and the full transaction history of the HELOC. 10 minutes later, a reply popped up from Graham's representation, a junior associate at a flashy firm who clearly had no idea what was happening. The client states these entities are established and separate. The email read, "We are working on a tight timeline for the proposal. Can we expedite not without proof of funds?" I typed back, my fingers flying. "Due diligence requires we verify the origin of the consulting fees paid to H.S. Advisory to ensure no conflict of interest." They were panicking. I could feel it in the speed of their replies. They sent back a chaotic zip file labeled supplemental docs. I opened the first PDF. It was an updated notary affidavit for the loan documents, intended to prove everything was above board, but in their haste, they had not scrubbed the metadata. I looked at the digital stamp at the bottom of the page. It recorded the IP address of the device used to sign the affidavit. I ran the IP through a location tracer. It did not point to a notary public's office. It pointed to the guest Wi-Fi network of the Driscoll Hotel. The timestamp was Tuesday at 10:15 in the morning. I leaned back in my chair, the cold light of the monitor reflecting in my eyes. Graham thought he was hiding his assets from a clueless wife. He had no idea that the annoying lawyer demanding receipts was the woman he slept next to every night. He was asking me to review the contract for his own funeral, and I was going to make sure every single word was binding. The litigation hold hit Graham's email server at 9 in the morning, freezing every digital footprint he had created in the last 6 months. By noon, we were sitting in a sterile conference room for a pre-litigation mediation. Graham walked in with Rhett Carver, a lawyer whose suit cost more than my first car and whose reputation was built on burying inconvenient wives. Graham looked tired but composed, wearing the expression of a martyr. He did not look at me. He looked at the mediator, sighing as he sat down. "My client is here under protest," Rhett began, smoothing his tie. "We believe this restraining order on the assets is a hysterical reaction to a simple financial misunderstanding. Mr. Pierce has been taking steps to secure the family's future. His wife, unfortunately, has been exhibiting signs of severe paranoia and instability." Graham nodded solemnly. "I just want her to get help," he said, his voice dripping with faux concern. "She started tracking my car. She put cameras in the house. I tried to refinance the home to have cash on hand for her. Treatment. I sat perfectly still. I did not blink. I did not interrupt. I let him dig the hole until the shovel hit bedrock. Darla Wynne waited exactly 3 seconds after he finished speaking. Then, without a word, she slid a heavy binder across the table. "That is interesting," Darla said, her voice dangerously pleasant. "Because, according to this HELOC agreement, the funds were not for medical treatment. They were dispersed to a dummy account, and the signature on the document is dated last Tuesday at 10:15 in the morning." Rhett glanced at the paper, unbothered. "So, a standard remote closing." At 10:15 in the morning, Darla continued, "Brianna was on a recorded video conference with 40 witnesses. Here is the log, here is the screenshot, and here involves the burner phone your client hid under his car seat." She placed the photo of the cracked Android phone on the table, along with the transcript of the texts. Graham shifted in his seat. I don't know what that phone is. We also have the metadata from the notary affidavit," Darla said. "It was signed from an IP address at the Driscoll Hotel in Austin. Graham, you told your wife you were in Denver." Graham's eyes darted to Rhett, then back to Darla. He was losing the narrative. "I came back early," he stammered. "I wanted to surprise her. I met the notary near downtown Austin to get it done quickly." The room went silent. Rhett Carver stopped taking notes. He looked at his client with the sharp, predatory gaze of a lawyer who realizes he has been lied to. "You met the notary in Austin," Rhett repeated slowly, "when you stated in your deposition draft that you were out of state." "It was just a mix-up with dates," Graham said, sweat beginning to bead on his upper lip. "I was trying to handle the business." "Speaking of business," I said. It was the first time I had spoken. I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward them. "Let's watch a movie." I pressed play on the kitchen security footage. The video showed Graham lunging for my phone, his face twisted in rage, his voice clear and menacing as he ordered me to ignore the bank's call. It did not look like a husband helping a sick wife. It looked like an assailant. Rhett looked away from the screen. He was done defending the caring husband angle. Darla delivered the final blow. She pulled out the draft of the prenuptial agreement, the very same document Graham had sent to my firm. "We also have a copy of the prenup you are currently drafting for your intended fiancé," Darla said. "Specifically, the clause regarding the competency narrative. You wrote that if you could prove Brianna was unstable, you would take control of the assets. Who advised you to include that?" "Graham. That is conspiracy to commit fraud." Graham slammed his hand on the table. "It wasn't my idea," he shouted, his composure shattering completely. "H.S. told me it was standard protection. My advisor said he stopped." He realized what he had done. He had just admitted that there was a co-conspirator. "Your advisor," Darla said, writing it down. So, this was a premeditated scheme involving a third party. Rhett Carver closed his folder. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. "I think," Rhett said, standing up and buttoning his jacket, "that my client and I need a private recess. Immediately." Graham looked at me, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and hatred. I just looked back, my face a mask of absolute calm. He had walked into the room thinking he was the director of this play. He was just realizing that he was actually the defendant. The maitre d' tried to stop me at the entrance of the Apex, the rooftop restaurant where Austin's elite went to pretend they were untouchable. He looked at my crisp navy suit and briefcase, which stood in stark contrast to the cocktail dresses and tuxedos filling the room. "Madam, this is a private event," he said, stepping in my path. "I know," I replied, my voice steady and loud enough for the people at the nearest table to hear. "I am the legal counsel for Mr. Pierce. I have a scheduled consultation regarding the asset protection agreement he requested for tonight's proposal. It is billable time." I walked past him before he could process the lie. Technically, it was not a lie. Graham had requested the review. He just did not know I was the reviewer. I spotted them near the glass railing, framed by the city skyline. Graham looked dashing, the picture of a man who believed his own press release. Beside him stood Harper Sloan. She was younger than me, wearing a white silk dress that cost more than my first car. She looked triumphant, the woman who thought she had won the prize. Graham was busy signaling the waiter for champagne. I moved in. I did not approach Graham. I approached her. "Harper Sloan," I said, coming up beside her right elbow. She turned, her smile faltering slightly as she took in my appearance. She did not recognize me immediately. To her, I was just the obstacle Graham complained about, a faceless, crazy wife. "Do I know you?" she asked, her tone dismissive. "I am the attorney reviewing the prenuptial agreement Graham ordered," I said, opening my briefcase on a high-top table next to us. "We have a conflict regarding the disclosure of assets. Specifically, the payments made to H.S. Advisory." Harper froze. Her eyes darted to Graham, who was still facing the bar. The color drained from her cheeks. She knew exactly what H.S. Advisory was. I don't know what you are talking about," she stammered. "I think you do," I said, sliding a single sheet of paper toward her. It was the invoice I had photographed in the storage unit, next to a printout of the corporate registry linking her initials to the laundering account. If this money is not declared, it is tax fraud. And since Graham listed these debts as marital liabilities to be dumped on his ex-wife, the IRS will be looking for the consultant who facilitated it. That is you, Harper. Harper looked at the paper, then at me. The realization hit her like a physical slap. He told me the money was a gift," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He said it was an exit fund. He said you were unstable and he needed to hide it to protect me." "He is hiding it to protect himself," I replied, keeping my voice low and lethal. "He is setting us both up. I get the debt. You get the fraud charge. He gets the house. Before she could respond, Graham turned around, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He saw me. The glass in his left hand tilted, spilling liquid onto his expensive shoes. "Brianna," he choked out. "What the hell are you doing here?" He tried to recover instantly, putting on his victim face for the guests nearby. "Honey, please. Not here. I told you we could talk later. You are making a scene." "I am doing my job, Graham," I said, reviewing the contract. At that exact moment, Harper's phone buzzed on the table between us. It was a harsh, vibrating sound against the glass. She looked down. A notification from her banking app flashed on the screen. Transfer of $50,000. Declined. Account frozen by court order. The air seemed to vanish from the rooftop. The exit fund Graham had promised her was gone. My restraining order had hit the banking system 5 minutes ago. Graham forced a laugh, raising his glass to the room, trying to drown out the tension. "Everyone, if I could have your attention, I have a very special question to ask tonight." He reached for Harper's hand. She snatched it back as if he were burning her. She took a step away, creating a chasm of silence between them that everyone in the restaurant noticed. "Don't," Harper hissed. "The money is gone. Graham, it is frozen." Graham's smile twitched, threatening to collapse into a snarl. "It is just a glitch. Harper, baby, look at me." I stepped forward, breaking his line of sight. I did not scream. I did not throw a drink. I simply spoke clearly enough for the entire gathered crowd to hear. "You are proposing, Graham, but you have not finished explaining the debts standing in my name." The murmur of the crowd died instantly. Graham dropped the act. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep hard enough to bruise, and dragged me toward the service alcove near the restrooms. "You think this is funny," he whispered, his face inches from mine, his breath hot with aggression. "I will ruin you. I will tell the judge you stalked me here. I will paint you as a lunatic who crashed my engagement. You are done, Brianna." I looked down at his hand gripping my arm, then up at the security camera blinking red in the corner of the ceiling. "Smile, Graham," I said softly. "You are threatening a witness on camera after your mistress just rejected you. You are not controlling the narrative anymore. You are just the man who forgot to check for surveillance." He released me as if I were radioactive. But it was too late. The audience outside was whispering. Harper was gone, and I was the only one standing still in the chaos he had created. The fallout from the rooftop was not a slow burn. It was an explosion. By 9 o'clock the next morning, the Summit Harbor Bank Fraud Department had flagged the IP address discrepancies on the notarized documents. The digital trail did not match the physical location of the notary's office, and the geolocation data placed the signing device at a hotel, not a bank branch. My phone rang while I was pouring coffee. The caller ID showed a name I recognized from the fraudulent paperwork the notary public, Mrs. Pierce. "Oh, thank God you picked up." The woman's voice was high and brittle, trembling with panic. "Listen, the bank is asking questions about the video session log. They are saying the timestamp doesn't match my journal. I need you to just send an email confirming you authorized the remote session. Just a quick note. Please. I have kids. If I lose my commission..." I pressed the record button on my phone, ensuring the notification beep was audible. "This call is being recorded for legal purposes," I said, my voice devoid of sympathy. "I did not authorize a remote session. I was never in a video call with you. You notarized a signature for a woman who was not there, likely because my husband paid you an expedite fee. I suggest you hire criminal defense counsel immediately. Do not call me again." I hung up. There was no joy in it, only the grim satisfaction of a mechanic tightening a bolt. Minutes later, a text arrived from Harper. It was a screenshot of an internal email Graham had drafted but not yet sent. "He is going to throw us both under the bus," Harper texted. The image showed a draft letter to the bank, Attached with a forged authorization form ostensibly sent from my personal email account, an account Graham had hacked days ago. The text claimed that I had set up Pierce Meridian LLC and that he was merely a passive advisor. He was trying to reverse the narrative, making me the mastermind and himself the duped spouse. I forwarded the screenshot to Darla immediately. "File it," I told her. "He just gave us the intent to defraud." Darla wasted no time. She submitted a supplemental evidence package to the court and to the bank's legal team. It included everything: the photos of the signature practice notebook from Unit 229, the exit plan corkboard with the lock-in liability task checked off, the invoices from HS, Advisory, and the contradictory emails where Graham's team claimed the LLC was a legitimate premarital asset. By noon, Graham's lawyer, Rhett Carver, called Darla. The arrogance was gone from his tone. "We are willing to discuss a settlement," Rhett said. "Graham will agree to a quiet divorce. He keeps the house. Brianna takes the cash assets, and we drop the competency petition. We can make the bank issue go away if we present a united front." "The bank is a federally insured institution," Darla replied, her voice loud enough for me to hear over the speakerphone. "They have a mandatory reporting obligation for identity theft over $100,000. We are not negotiating a family dispute anymore. Rhett, we are witnessing a felony investigation." Graham, realizing the walls were closing in, attempted the only strategy he had left: emotional terrorism. He showed up at the front door of the house an hour later. He carried a bouquet of lilies, my least favorite flower, and looked disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed. "Bree, please," he choked out. Leaning against the doorframe, I refused to open fully. "We are a team. We can fix this. I was scared about money. I did it for us." When I did not move, his face hardened. The tears evaporated instantly, replaced by the sneer I had seen in the garage. "You know, if you push this, I will ruin you," he hissed, stepping closer. "I will tell the Bar Association you violated attorney-client privilege by reviewing my prenup. I will say you used your access to steal my files. You will never practice law in Texas again." I laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. "You sent that prenup to my firm. Graham," I said. "I was assigned the file. And in that draft, you included a clause about declaring me mentally incompetent to seize my assets. You wrote down your own motive. It is called fraudulent inducement, and it proves you never intended to be married. You intended to be a widower with a checkbook." I slammed the door in his face and locked the deadbolt. At 3 in the afternoon, the notification came through my secure portal. Rhett Carver had filed a motion to withdraw as counsel for Graham Pierce. The note attached was standard legal polite speak, but the subtext was screaming. Rhett had seen the video of the storage unit and the forgery practice book. He knew Graham was not just a liar. He was a liability who would drag his lawyer into a disbarment hearing. Graham was now alone. Then came the final turn of the screw. A process server did not come for me. He walked up the driveway and taped a notice to the front door while Graham was sitting in his car, furiously typing on his phone. It was not a divorce summons. It was a subpoena from the Summit Harbor Bank Special Investigations Unit, requiring Graham Pierce to appear for a deposition regarding suspected wire fraud and identity theft. Graham got out of his car and ripped the paper off the door. He stared at it, his hands shaking. He finally looked up at the security camera above the garage, the one he had mocked days ago. He realized then that this was no longer a domestic squabble he could charm his way out of. The system he had tried to manipulate had turned its gears, and it was coming to crush him. The conference room air was stale, recycled, and heavy with the scent of total defeat. Graham sat across from us, alone. His expensive lawyer had fled the sinking ship, leaving him with a court-appointed representative who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. Darla Wynne did not waste time on pleasantries. She placed 3 distinct items on the polished mahogany table. The first was the court order freezing all assets. The second was a hard drive containing terabytes of digital forensics. The third was a thin, stapled document titled Settlement Agreement and Mutual Release. You have two choices today. Graham, Darla said, her voice level. Option A is we walk out of here, hand this hard drive to the district attorney, and watch you get indicted for wire fraud, identity theft, and forgery. Option B is you sign this. Graham's face flushed a deep, ugly red. He slammed his hand on the table. She broke into my storage unit. That is inadmissible. She stole my property. Actually, Darla countered, sliding a sheet of paper forward. We have the access logs. The code used to enter the gate was your birthday. You gave her that code implicitly by using it for 7 years. Furthermore, here is the forensic analysis of the notebook found inside. A handwriting expert has already confirmed that the practiced forgeries of Brianna's signature match your pen pressure. We are not stealing anything. We are preserving a crime scene. Graham opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the physical copy of the prenuptial agreement he had sent to Cedar and Wren Legal. I flipped it open to page 4, where he had highlighted the clause about the proposal to Coworker. I placed it gently on top of his hands. I am the one who reviewed this. Graham, I said softly. You sent your plan to destroy me directly to my desk. You wanted to bury me, but you handed me the shovel. The room went dead silent. Graham stared at the document, his eyes widening as the absolute absurdity of his failure sank in. Here are the terms, I continued, my voice steady. You assume 100% of the debt. The home equity line of credit, the credit cards you opened in my name, and the fees for Pierce Meridian LLC are yours. You will sign a quitclaim deed transferring the house solely to me, and you will sign a sworn affidavit admitting to the fraud, which will be held in escrow. If you ever miss a payment or try to contact me again, we release it to the police. I can't, Graham stammered, sweat dripping down his temple. That's financial suicide. I'll be ruined. You are already ruined, a female voice said from the doorway. We all turned. Harper Sloan walked in, flanked by her own attorney. She looked pale but determined. She did not look at Graham with love. She looked at him with the cold calculation of a survivor. We are submitting a voluntary statement, Harper's lawyer announced. Ms. Sloan is prepared to testify that Mr. Pierce coerced her into impersonating his wife during the remote notary session. She was told it was a harmless administrative workaround. She is cooperating fully to avoid prosecution. Graham slumped in his chair. It was over. The mistress he had tried to impress with stolen money was now the nail in his coffin. If he fought this, the bank would move the file to the federal prosecutor, and with Harper's testimony, he would be trading his suit for an orange jumpsuit. Where do I sign? He whispered. Darla pushed the papers toward him. He picked up the pen, and for the first time, I watched his hand shake. The arrogance that had allowed him to practice my signature for hours in a cold storage unit was gone. He scrawled his name a jagged, broken line that looked nothing like the confident man I had married. When he finished, he looked up at me. His eyes were wet. I never hated you, Bree. I wanted more. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt a weight lift off my chest that I had not realized I was carrying. I don't hate you either. Graham, I said, I just see exactly who you are. The judge signed the orders an hour later. The house was mine. The debt was his. The restraining order was permanent. That night, I stood in the kitchen of the home that was finally, truly mine. The cameras were gone. The holiday menu folder was archived. I turned off the overhead light, plunging the room into darkness. I did not feel lonely. I felt clean. I took a deep breath, inhaling the silence, knowing that tomorrow morning I would wake up and own my name again. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and let's chat. If you enjoyed this takedown, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people.